a representative to division headquarters. And they had something called the Watch Committee. I don't know what it stood for. I thought I was going to get a watch. It's some sort of an acronym. The military and the government always use acronyms. But it basically was about racial relations. And the gentleman that headed that up was a colonel who was at division headquarters by the name of Colin Powell. Very interesting man to meet, very nice guy, very bright guy. And I didn't know much about anything then, but I said, boy, this guy's, he's going to be something someday. He's sharp. So it's interesting. The Americal's got, my division, has a bad and a good lineage. The good lineage is Colin Powell, Schwarzkopf, the former governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Ridge. Yes. He and I were in the same, didn't know each other at the time. He and I were in the same battle in September of '69 called the Battle of Hepduck. He was a Harvard grad and was an infantry platoon sergeant. He refused an officer's commission, got drafted. He just wanted to get his 2 years in and get out. And that's where he lost his hearing. If you notice, Tom Ridge wears, if you see a close-up shot of him, he wears hearing aids. He lost his hearing in the Battle of Hepduck in September of '69. And then there's a bad lineage that goes along with the Americal Division. There, of course, is Lieutenant Calley in the My Lai massacre. There are two movies that were made. One with, I believe it's Michael J. Fox. Yes, and that actually happened in the Americal Division. That's based on a true story. And then there was another one with, it was a made-for-TV movie with Carol Burnett and Ned Beatty, and I think that one actually happened when I was there. It was called Friendly Fire, and that's where her son was killed on what we called the short round. The round didn't have enough explosive behind it and fell on a defensive position and killed an American. The Army stonewalled her for probably the better part of a year, to because she really wanted to know the circumstances of her son's death. How could he be blown up? He was inside the perimeter, and they stonewalled her. So the Army didn't do such a great job then in disseminating information. So there's good and bad in all of this. So.
Good question.
Sir.
Was there a general reaction of people when you came back home?
Well, it wasn't good. I came home. I came into Fort Lewis, Washington. They gave us clean uniforms, our medals, money, and airplane tickets. I was flying from Seattle, Tacoma to Washington, and then to Chicago, and then Chicago to Philadelphia. And remember, I was only 20. Literally had 15 minutes to catch a flight. There's a bar in the airport, and I wanted to get a beer. So this would be great. I get a beer before I get on the plane. And I wasn't 21 at the time. And the bartender, first of all, he looked at me. I'm in the uniform, and you can tell already this guy's got an attitude. And he was an older guy, which kind of surprised me. You think an older guy have a little bit of an affinity towards military. And he said, "You 21?" And I was honest with him. I said, "No," I said, "I'm not." I said, "Look," I said, "I just got back from Vietnam. I'm going home. I'm going to catch a plane right over there. I just wanted a beer before I go home." And he gave me some lip, and he said, "No." And I pointed to my medals, and I said, "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" And I can't tell you exactly what he said, but it didn't mean a thing to him. So I had two choices. Walk away and get on your plane and go home, or go across the bar and hit him over the head with a bottle, and I chose to go home. So I got out of a couple traffic tickets. I was home about 2 days. I had saved my money the entire year I was in Vietnam, and I just dreamt of buying an MGB. Those of you, probably you'd have to look one up online. But it was a little English sports car, little two-seater, about the size of a Mazda Miata M5. And I bought the Miata, bought the MGB literally the second day home. And I'm driving down the street. In those days, they used to paint the stripes down the middle of the road. And they put traffic cones up, because they didn't have quick-drying paint. They didn't have the trucks with heaters that dried the paint. So I said, boy, this is great. I can downshift and see what I can do. And I downshifted and went through the cones, and sure enough, there's a Philadelphia cop. He grabbed me, and he said, "What do you think you were doing?" He was like stunned that I would do this broad daylight. And I said, well, I said, you know, you're not going to believe this. I said, but I just got this car, saved my money all year in Vietnam. This is the first time I've driven it. And just wanted to run it through its paces. He said, you just got back from Vietnam? I said, yes, I did. I said, okay. He said, where do you live? I said, I literally live around the corner. He said, let's go home. You show me some paperwork. He said, if you didn't get home from Vietnam, he said, I'm going to beat you up and lock you up. Well, my poor mother, I pull up on one day home and there's a cop outside with me walking up to the steps. But in general, people didn't really embrace Vietnam vets. Not even our families. No one wanted to talk about it. It was kind of like, okay, you're home, it's done and over. And I had friends who were Vietnam veterans, and we would talk amongst ourselves. And because nobody else could really relate to what we saw, what we thought, what we experienced. So it was kind of a closed group. I had a couple friends, two friends that OD'd on drugs shortly after they returned from Vietnam. Another guy, two friends that drank themselves to death. Took them longer. Were Vietnam veterans. So, you know, we saw a lot of what we call post-war casualties. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that you couldn't open up about it. The VA shunned us. For years, the VA would never admit that there was anything wrong with being exposed to Agent Orange. Now they have an open medical program because of that, to any Vietnam veteran. But for years, we were told there's nothing wrong. You know, I used to get rashes every year that were unexplainable on my lower trunk of my body that nobody could explain. So, but we weren't openly received. And even other veterans group, interestingly enough, looked at us as kind of like losers. You lost the war. Yeah, you know, they looked at us as like, you guys lost. You know, it wasn't a home run. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
When you were actually in Vietnam, did all the anti-war stuff going on home, did that affect you or the men?
Didn't bother me. I just wanted to get my time in and get home. And we had these cute little slogans, FTA, and it didn't mean future through the Army. We'd have that written on our helmets. Guys wore peace signs. Every once in a while, somebody would tell you to take the peace sign off. I was in an aviation unit, and that was a little bit different. We were 19. The pilots were 20, 21. There were warrant officers that were flying helicopters. There's a certain camaraderie on a helicopter crew. There's not that formality of rank that you get in other branches or other organizations, because when you're up in that helicopter, that bullet doesn't know if you're a sergeant or a warrant officer. You're all kind of in the same boat. So there is a certain camaraderie. We didn't have that rank distinction. I used to drink with the officers every night. I started drinking gin martinis because I didn't like warm Budweiser. Budweiser was the only beer you could get, so I started drinking gin martinis with the officers. And we probably drank to excess, but we never missed a mission. So we had a cutoff. You had to stop drinking by 4 in the morning. I'd take 2 showers, and then you could fly. Yeah. No one said we were smart. So.
Other questions? I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about morale generally after death. You're there, you know, in any direct experience with problems between officers and enlisted?
We had a couple incidents. We had a couple of officers that tried to ride guys hard. They would pick out like 1 or 2 individuals, never understood why, what the benefit was. We usually worked around it. I had a platoon commander one time that was a real pain in the neck, and I just ignored him. And, you know, what was he? I had a guy tell me one time, and it was him. He said, "You've got a bad attitude." He said, "I'm going to put you on report." And I looked at him and I said, "You got to be kidding me." You're going to put me over? That's your trump card? I said, I've been shot at. I've had